One amazing season for USC culminates with one amazing game and a less than amazing result if you're wearing USC colors. But we will wrap it all up concerning the Cotton Bowl and the season and more as we head into the offseason and track those storylines with Matt Zemek, of course, from Trojans Wire. Get on over to Trojans Wire, folks. Matt is the very best, and we don't have a show or a channel here at the voice of college football, USC, without Matt. Matt, good to see you tonight.
Good to see you, Mark. Happy New Year. And of course, at USC, it's a very frustration-filled New Year. That's what happens when your offense gets nearly 600 yards. You don't punt. You're 13 of 15 on third downs. I mean, now technically 11 of 15, but I think that if you convert the subsequent fourth down, that counts as a third down conversion. So if you go by that metric, USC was 13 of 15 on third downs. Caleb Williams plays out of his mind, and yet you lose. And USC was plus 18 in time of possession, 39-21, and Lincoln Riley was milking the play clock throughout the second half. Like, it wasn't just midway through the fourth quarter. He was doing it late in the third, early in the fourth. He was taking the play clock under 7 most of the time, and a lot of the time under 3 or 4 seconds. Because, like, he knew we have to shorten this game as much as we reasonably can, up 45-30 with 4.5 minutes left, and still. And it was just fascinating, just as an individual, looking at this game and thinking about, who's going to win, how's this all going to go. So when USC was up 15 with 4.5 minutes left, I was thinking, well, it's not quite over. Like, the offense failed to seal the deal on that drive, settling for a field goal, not being able to get at least one more first down to bleed some more clock. So I was thinking, with 4.5 minutes left, okay, I mean, like, USC's in good shape. You're certainly going to expect that you're going to win when you're up 15 with 4.5 left. But I was also thinking, this is not over, like, not with this defense. And sure enough, the really quick touchdown to reshape things. And then really the play that was the remarkable, plot twist and all of it. Mario Williams bobbling the kickoff out of bounds at the 1-yard line. And this was the one mistake Lincoln Riley made in terms of a play call. Like, I mean, you can always look at imperfect play calls throughout a game, but like, in terms of the one really big mistake he made, it was having the shotgun run on second down. First off, you need to do whatever you can to get the first down. It's like, if you get the first down, you control the ball. Tulane has no timeouts at that point. You win the game if you get the first down. So that's one reason why you have to throw there on 2nd and 10. But the other is that, at least if you're going to run the ball, it should be a dive, a fullback dive in a heavy set formation with the quarterback under center, or a quarterback sneak, anything to avoid the safety. Because here's the other thing. You're up 8, 45-37 at that point. All right, if Tulane gets the ball back with great field position, it's not the outcome you want, but it's better than the safety. Like, the safety was the worst case scenario, and Lincoln Riley needed to think that through in terms of, whatever we do, avoid the safety. Like, Caleb Williams throwing an interception would be better than a safety, because, all right, Tulane gets the ball back, but it still has to get a 2-point conversion if it does get a touchdown. And let's say Tulane does get the 2-point conversion. Well, you still have the ball back, and you're Caleb Williams, and you're USC, and you still have a good chance of driving the ball down the field. Like, Tulane hasn't stopped you. So if it's a 45-45 game, a tie, after Tulane gets 8 points, you still have the upper hand. The safety was the worst case scenario, and Lincoln Riley, wasn't able to avoid it in that 2nd and 10 shotgun run from the end zone, and invited the prospect of Tulane doing exactly what it did, crashing down, getting penetration in the backfield, and getting that safety. And then one more thing, and just in terms of processing this game emotionally and just thinking it through and assessing everything. So, like, when Tulane got the ball back, I thought, all right, Tulane's winning this game. It's going to be 46-45. Even when Tulane had 4th and 10 near the 40 with 38 seconds left, I'm thinking, okay, well, make 50-50 chance here. Maybe USC wins, but, like, I'm not convinced. Like it's like you have to just drive it through the dagger, make the final play, and USC had failed to make that final play all game long. And so it's just a testament to how, in a normal situation, okay, you lead by 6 points. The opponent has 4th and 10 near its own 40-yard line with no timeouts, 38 seconds left. Like 99 times out of 100, you should be confident in that situation. If you're facing that down and distance with that little time left, 99 times out of 100, you should feel confident that you're going to win. I did not feel confident just, in terms of thinking who's going to win this game. And so that is just a testament to how bad USC was on defense. And just to underline this for all the people who are watching here on the Voice of College Football, let's be very, very clear here. This was the worst defensive performance of the season. Like we've seen lots of bad defensive performances. The Cal performance, I'd say, was close to being the worst because you turned Jack Plummer into another Cal quarterback, Aaron Rodgers. Jack Plummer toasting you for over 400 yards. That is pretty bad. But that was still a game where Cal never did get the ball back with a chance to win, let alone actually win the game. This was the worst. And I think what really gets to the heart of why this was the worst is that USC was controlling the ball. USC had the ball, as I mentioned earlier, for 39 minutes plus 18. Tulane scored its 44 offensive points plus the 2 on the safety. Tulane scores 44 offensive points on 52 plays. That's nearly 1 point per play. USC had roughly 30 more plays than Tulane, did everything it could to minimize the amount of snaps Tulane had, and Tulane still goes nuclear on USC. And the final detail is when USC had the 15-point lead with 4:30 left, Tulane's able to just, go right down the field in 2 plays. Like at the very least, make Tulane work a little bit. Make Tulane take at least 2 flipping minutes off the clock so that time and score becomes a little bit more of a squeeze for the Green Wave. But no, it was an instant touchdown. And Tulane, when the score was 42-30, or actually, no, when it was 35-24 earlier in the second half, you're thinking, okay, USC leads by 11, late third quarter. Maybe Tulane's going to have to throw the ball. No, was able to just get a huge run to get right back in the game. So, conventional situations where you think, all right, like it's not the worst outcome to give up a touchdown. Let's just at least make Tulane bleed a little clock to give ourselves a breather and to, reduce the time and score leverage that Tulane has. No, it couldn't even do that. And then, of course, at the very end, on a day when Tulane really was running the ball so well with Ty J. Spears, then at the very, very end, Tulane gets 50 yards on 2 pass plays and is able to get right down there to the 7. And then just to add insult to injury, we almost had a Mark Richt, Georgia, Alabama 2012 SEC championship game scenario, almost, but that Tulane tight end dropped the ball. If he catches that pass at the 4-yard line, game's over. But no, he had to drop the pass. Tulane gets the extra shot, wins the game. Just an absolute SHIT sandwich for USC fans. It was really, I'm doing my job on one hand, but then like the other part of my brain is going, that's the darndest thing I've ever seen. And I was doing it pretty much almost every other play. It was a remarkable game to witness on a lot of levels.
I'm looking at Tulane's schedule. They scored more points than they did against USC on one occasion. That was against SMU in a 59-24 win. They also had some 45-point games against the likes of UCF and South Florida, the Mighty Bulls of South Florida. So 2 things come to mind in response to that rant. Number one was the indictment that you make in rating your level of confidence at 50% for a defense that is protecting 4th and 10. 4th and 10 is a 15% play, 20% play, maybe.
Yeah.
The other one would be, I didn't realize until I was talking to our buddy Tim that Mario Williams should not have been returning a kickoff, that was Raleek Brown's role.
Well, like he has been used at times, but the thing I noticed on watching the replay of that is that Mario Williams was not squared up to the ball. If for people watching at home here at the Voice of College Football, if you get a chance to look at the replay, his back is not to the goal line. He was turned at like a 45-degree angle so that his body was facing the diagonally, like, so he caught the ball, or he tried to catch the ball at like the 3-yard line. So his body was like facing toward the 10-yard line, roughly like that. And so his body was turned diagonally toward the middle of the field. It wasn't as though he was straight up with his back square to the goal line. So he was off balance. He was not straight up. And so, if he bobbles the ball from a straight up squared position, that ball is going to go in front of him. Now, maybe Tulane recovers, but the chances of the ball going out at the 1-yard line are nil. Like, that ball is going to go out to like the 10, 12-yard line, and USC doesn't get in that very specific pickle, which enabled Tulane to get the safety and win the game in regulation. So, I mean, we can deal with whether or not he should have been back there, but he didn't play it right. You should be, your body should be toward the goal line, and just looking straight ahead at the field. Why are you coming at the ball from an angle like that? Just shouldn't happen. I mean, I know that the kick is going to the side, but you need to be like, it's like an outfielder preparing to make a catch and throwing to home plate. You get behind the ball. Now, I mean, if like in baseball, of course, if you have to dive, okay, you have to get at it from the side. But in terms of, gathering under a normal fly ball, and that's the analogy here. This is a fly ball coming at you. You circle around behind the ball and get fully in front of it so that you can make the catch. All right. And Mario Williams did not do that. And it just reinforces the point that, and I've planted my flag here on this one, and I've written about it at Trojans Wire. Lincoln Riley's been winging it on special teams, and this is the big leagues. You can't wing it at this level, and it's one of 3 phases of football. And we've seen, like, Notre Dame, USC's rival, which, by the way, just got Sam Hartman. So, like, next year in South Bend, that's going to be a really tough game. And Notre Dame has one of the best special teams coaches in the country. If Notre Dame gets 7 points against USC next year with Sam Hartman being at quarterback, those added 7 points on a blocked punt or some other special teams play, that could make all the difference. And if you're Lincoln Riley, you're paid to make the college football playoff. You're paid to compete for national championships. You need an elite special teams guy. And not having an elite special teams guy on this staff, you are giving away points. And if you expect the best, if you insist on the highest standards, then you don't just say, well, we're going to wing it. Special teams, you only have a few plays a game. We can get by. I don't want to burn one of my 10 assistant spots. Is that a professional attitude? Is that a national championship mentality for yourself and your program? I think the answer is very clear, and this game reinforced it.
Special teams is not as important as it once was. We've had that discussion about a number of plays that have been taken out of the game, the punt return game to a certain extent, the kickoff return game to a certain extent, but still worthy of a coordinator. Certainly, just look around the country. So, Matt.
Absolutely. And I think this gets into really the conversation that, we're supposed to have tonight, Mark, and that is that, what does Lincoln Riley truly value? And is Lincoln Riley ready to make tough choices? And this goes back to our Riley Files series over the summer. When we talked to an Oklahoma insider, and he looked at the good and the bad of Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma. And one of the things our Oklahoma insider said was, Lincoln Riley, he has a tendency to be loyal to a certain set of guys. And there's going to come a time at USC, and we're there right now, where is he willing to, forget about loyalty to certain individuals and think about loyalty to the program and thinking about putting the best absolute product he can put out on the field. And so he has questions to answer with Alex Grinch. And to be fair to Alex, all right, to be fair to Alex Grinch, USC doesn't have the dudes. Like we've covered that piece of terrain quite a lot over the past 4 months. And for all the Oklahoma fans who are saying, we told you, I knew this was coming. Like, I'm not surprised. I've been saying that USC was going to play a lot of shootouts this season. I've been saying that USC had to be scoring 45 or more points to have a reasonable chance of winning games. Like, I wasn't caught off guard. I knew this is how Lincoln Riley rolls. So, yeah, you told us, but like, hey, I haven't been living under a rock. I've been following Oklahoma football under Lincoln Riley the past several years. I knew this was coming. So, like, it's true. Like, I agree with this. I agree with the central thesis that Lincoln Riley has shown Alex Grinch a lot of loyalty. And now he comes up against the realization of, is this the best product I can put out on the field at USC? And the critique of Lincoln Riley, which is really resonant and is moreover fair, is if he keeps Alex Grinch, what does that say about Lincoln Riley in terms of being the best, in terms of pursuing excellence and valuing it? And it's similar to his view of a special teams coordinator. Does he really value complete excellence across the board in everything he does? Now, on offense, he's a genius. He's at the top of the class. He's coached 3 Heisman Trophy winners before turning 40 years old. I mean, he is an absolute wizard. But the other two sides of the other facets of play, special teams and especially defense, well, they're being neglected. Like that is just obvious. And here's the other part of the question of the situation that we need to pay a little bit of attention to. Alex Grinch, he's a grown man. All right. No one's holding a gun to his head. Okay. No one is saying, we know where your family lives. You have to coach for Lincoln Riley. Like that. That's not the situation. Like, he can make his own choices. And I do realize, as we go back 13 months to late November of 2021, when Lincoln Riley made the decision to go from Oklahoma to USC. And if you're Alex Grinch, you're thinking, well, I really don't have much time to decide. I guess I might as well follow Lincoln Riley to USC, and I get to coach at USC, and it seems like an opportunity, and we're going to have Caleb Williams, and like that, this offense is going to be great, and I'm going to be in the hunt for Pac-12 and national championships. I guess I need to go. I need to follow Lincoln, but did he absolutely have to? And I realized that in the heat of the moment, Alex Grinch might have felt boxed in, but again, Alex Grinch is a free individual. He's a grown man. He can make his own choices. And Alex Grinch knows this better than anyone else, that Lincoln Riley at Oklahoma in 2019, he asked him to clean up the mess that Mike Stoops left behind. So Grinch's fundamental job was take an absolutely awful, atrocious defense and just make it decent, make it good enough with the offense that Lincoln Riley had with Jalen Hurts, and then subsequently with Spencer Rattler, and then Caleb Williams. All right. So when Lincoln Riley decided to go from Oklahoma to USC, Alex Grinch had to have known better than anyone else. Oh, well, this USC defense under Clay Helton and then Todd Orlando and Dante Williams gave up 62 points to UCLA. I'm getting the same job assignment all over again. I'm being asked to take an absolutely awful and atrocious defense and just make it decent enough. But, I'm not going to have really good players. I'm certainly not going to have, a deep roster loaded with good players. I'm just going to try to, make the best of a bad situation on defense. Alex Grinch didn't have to take on that assignment. He wanted to, or at least by going with Lincoln Riley to USC, he basically made the statement, yes, I will take on this challenge. Yes, this is what I want to do with my career. But he did not have to do it. Like, there's no contractual clause. There's no moral or ethical obligation. He could have bailed. He could have looked for a different job. He could have looked for a situation where either like he's the head coach of a Sun Belt or Conference USA program, or he wanted to be the coordinator at a lower tier program with less scrutiny, akin to what he did with Mike Leach at Washington State. he could have found another spot in the coaching industry. Maybe you spend a few years in the salt mines, and then you develop your career from that vantage point. Because Grinch has had high-profile positions: Ohio State before Oklahoma, before Washington State, and then Oklahoma. Was this the trajectory that was best serving Alex Grinch's career? We can debate that, but he was willing to accept being with Lincoln Riley on these, thankless task reclamation projects. Take something that's awful, just make it less awful, and that can be enough to make the college football playoff. He didn't have to make that choice. And so this is a lot of this. It's fascinating how the blame shared between Lincoln Riley and Alex Grinch works out, because a lot of people will say, again, fairly, that it's not really Alex Grinch's fault. It's Lincoln Riley's for keeping Alex Grinch employed and continuing to trust Alex Grinch. There's something to that criticism. But we also have to say, Alex Grinch, you're taking on these jobs, and you did not have to. I mean, we can say that Oklahoma was the first example of this. You had to have known, Alex Grinch, that this USC job was going to be like the Oklahoma job, okay? You wanted to run that all back. You wanted to have that same basic scenario again. Alex Grinch is responsible for accepting this job. So while most USC fans are thinking, okay, Lincoln, you need to cut the cord with Alex Grinch. You need to fire him. You need to make a run at Jim Leonard of Wisconsin, or, formerly of Wisconsin, as USC goes into the Big Ten, that we can deal with that whole line of thought and that thought process from the USC side. We also have to include this. Alex Grinch is also responsible for taking on these jobs, because he did not have to, but he wanted to, or at least if he inwardly thought when Lincoln Riley went from Oklahoma to USC, darn, I actually wish I could have stayed at Oklahoma. I really don't want to go out to Los Angeles. I don't want to go into this fishbowl in Southern California. And I'm not saying he did, but if he privately, in his heart of hearts, really didn't want to go out there, well, then you didn't have to go. But you obviously wanted it enough to take on this challenge. And you, Alex Grinch, have to bear some responsibility for that decision. It's really fascinating to see how the interplay between Lincoln Riley's responsibility for his choices and Alex Grinch's responsibility for his choices shakes out here at the Voice of College Football.
I'm on the side of Lincoln Riley is the boss. He runs the program. He is ultimately responsible for who he hires or fires. And Alex Grinch, based on his career trajectory, to me, even though this may not be a good fit or a career move, ultimately was a no-brainer for him to take the USC defensive coordinator job. I just think you don't turn that down.
And I think that's fair. I would simply say that, Alex Grinch, I mean, let's keep this in mind. The fact that Alex Grinch had previously worked at Washington State meant that he knew what he was stepping into with this job at USC. Not just the fact that it's a high profile job where the national championships and college football playoff appearances are the standard, but also he knew that USC was in a really rough place defensively. And he knew that he wasn't going to have the bodies, the personnel, the dudes in this first year. And so, just knowing those dynamics, he had to have known that this was going to be a rough ride in year one. And if he didn't trust that he could at least create some degree of improvement with this unit, or at the very least avoid significant regression. And one can make the argument that the Cotton Bowl and why it's so damaging to Alex Grinch is that it was regression. A lot of the defensive performances, starting with the October Utah game and going through the second half of the season, they were all generally very bad. I mean, Notre Dame was kind of okay, but it was pretty bad on a steady basis. You kind of throw out the Colorado game because that's a junior varsity team. Colorado's obviously going to be a lot better with Deion Sanders this coming year. But this Tulane Cotton Bowl game, this was definitely a few steps lower than how USC had been playing at the previous level. Because in those other games, again, the time of possession was pretty even. The snaps, the number of plays were fairly even. USC's offense limited Tulane's number of plays. USC limited the extent to which Tulane was on the field, and yet Tulane was still scoring not only a lot of points, but obviously scoring points very, very quickly when trailing. Just no resistance at all from USC's defense on the majority of possessions. And this is after 4 weeks off. This is after guys getting healthy. This is after the bitter taste of that Pac-12 championship game. And guys wanting to be better, and everyone, just kind of letting the sting of that loss kind of settle into the pit of your stomach. And this is what happens. This is how you respond 4 weeks later. I mean, so, I've said that it's okay if Alex Grinch coaches in 2023, but I have to admit, this changes the equation. And you saw national commentators say it, and it's really hard to disagree with them, that if Lincoln Riley wants to have a serious program and wants to be taken seriously and viewed as a big boy player in the college football landscape, and you keep Alex Grinch after that, is he really running a serious program? I mean, he really has to confront that. And I will allow that, if USC can make significant transfer portal additions on defense, then that is really the gateway toward making this thing work with Alex Grinch. But here's one really important point that Lincoln Riley and Mike Bone need to be thinking about. And Gixxer Squid, you mentioned, do you think Mike Bone will lean into Lincoln Riley on this? I think here's really where the rubber meets the road. Is Alex Grinch keeping certain high-level defensive transfer portal prospects from going to USC? If there is an acutely felt sense, if the research, if any kind of input, communication, analysis is leading Mike Bone and Lincoln Riley to the conclusion that, if we had a better defensive coordinator than Alex Grinch, we would get more and better defensive transfer portal prospects, and Alex Grinch is preventing those extra defensive portal prospects from coming to USC, then you have to make a move, right? I mean, if there is a chilling effect on the influx of defensive transfer portal talent because Alex Grinch is there, that's where you have to make the move. Now, I don't know what the reality is, okay? But I'm saying if your analysts and your support staff and just talking to people in the industry, talking to prospects, feeling them out, and you get the sense that Alex Grinch is an impediment to getting the better defensive talent that you absolutely need on your roster, something which is magnified, of course, with Mekhi Blackman going to the NFL, Tuli Tuipulotu going to the NFL. If Grinch is really standing in the way of that defensive roster improvement that you so absolutely need, that's where you really have to make a move. Now, so if Alex Grinch is not an impediment, then you can certainly make a case for him staying. And then you just say, hey, let's just get these bodies in the portal. Let's also rely on our outstanding incoming defensive recruits, particularly Tackett Curtis. Lincoln Riley thinks he's the best linebacker recruit in the country. If you think you're going to be able to get personnel in spite of Alex Grinch, that Grinch is not going to be harmful in that particular respect, all right, fine. You give Alex Grinch 2023 to prove himself once and for all. This is it. You got to deliver. All right, fine. But if Grinch really is standing in the way of significant high-end defensive players coming to USC in the portal, that's where you have to make a move. And that is really where Mike Bone and Lincoln Riley really need to be earning their salaries right now. They need to be on top of that particular question at USC.
I would also think that Alex Grinch, in protecting his own interests, would have a conversation with Lincoln Riley before the season, maybe as he transitioned with Lincoln Riley to USC, to say, I know what the deal is. I know that you're going to stockpile on the offensive side. I've looked at the defensive rankings. I've looked over the personnel left on this defense. I know how bad it is. And then once those acquisitions were made, have that real down-to-earth conversation to say, this is what I see out of this defense. I think I can coach them up to a top 75 defense or whatever. And maybe Lincoln Riley's not pleased with that. Maybe he's accepting of that, but that he should be able to somewhat ballpark it. But as we just threw up on the banner, 106th in total defense and number 124 in yards per play with the likes of Charlotte and Arizona and those schools surrounding USC.
Yeah, no, there really needs to be some honest conversations in all directions. You know, Lincoln being honest with Alex, Alex being honest with Lincoln, and Mike Bone giving Lincoln Riley, you know, some really good guidance here, you know, in terms of how everything develops and how everything goes forward. Because, you know, obviously Mike Bone placed a lot of trust in Lincoln Riley, and you don't want to be too heavy-handed. You know, you don't want to be too domineering or interventionist as an athletic director when you have a coach who's as talented as Lincoln Riley is. But Mike Bone is still the guy who oversees Lincoln Riley, and there does have to be at least some kind of conversation on accountability. And maybe, you know, maybe Lincoln Riley is able to stand his ground and say, nope, I'm not going to hire a special teams coach. No, I'm not going to make a change at defensive coordinator. Well, if he does, if he stands his ground there and he doesn't make those two particular staff changes, or at least not even one of the two, there still has to be a sense of, well, if it doesn't work this year, then I absolutely have to make the change next year. Like Mike Bone has to at least lean on Lincoln Riley to the extent of, you know, hey, I'm trusting you, but you don't have a limitless amount of trust. Like there are some things where if things go in the wrong direction, or we get to a point where it's not working out, like we have to have a limit, and it can't extend forever. And I know that Mike Bone is smart enough and savvy enough to be able to have that kind of conversation in the right way, with the right tone, the right balance, and impress upon Lincoln Riley, hey, this is your show, but it's not like 100% free reign. And I still have a role as athletic director in terms of how this program goes. You have to take certain things under consideration. You can't completely ignore certain outside realities.
I am surveying the recent transfer and trying to figure out who that is. Recent transfer going to who had originally committed to Notre Dame. Anyway, I will sort that out in my attempt to gather up some comments and questions, folks. You can leave those comments and questions in the live chat. We deliver them to Matt each and every week, typically on Monday night at 11 Eastern and 8 Pacific. But tonight, because of the Cotton Bowl coverage at the Voice of College Football, we switched up to Thursday night.
I just want to reiterate something. Len Dawson, OU fans warned you about Grinch. Okay, I just want to reiterate, like we told you, we warned you this was going to happen. We warned you this was coming. Again, who at USC wasn't aware that this was coming? Like we spent the off season saying that, you know, USC was going to play in a bunch of shootouts. USC was going to give up a lot of points. One of the things I said before the season and in the early part of the season, and Mark, you know this from all the shows that we've been doing here at the Voice of College Football, is that if USC's defense was giving up 30 points, you know, on a fairly consistent basis, that was going to be fine. That was going to be good enough to win. And like that turned out to be true. All right. You know, the Utah games, the Utah Pac-12 championship game, 47-24. Okay. But USC was headed toward scoring 38, 40 points before Caleb Williams got hurt. USC up 17-3 early. The Caleb Williams injury didn't decide the game, all right? Like, I'm not going to insult Utah by saying that, but the Caleb Williams injury certainly is what the main thing that affected USC's overall point total for that game. You also throw in the Andrew Voorhees injury. So, like, if those injuries don't occur, at least Caleb Williams not getting hurt so that he basically couldn't move around, USC's going to put up a pretty normal 35, 38, 41-point game. Probably wouldn't have won, given how bad the defense was that night. But still, the USC point output would have been in the mid-30s, one would think, at the very, very least. And so the other two USC losses this year, 43-42 to Utah, 46-45 to Tulane. You give up 30 points, you're fine. So like that thesis, that line of thought, that if USC is giving up 30 points steadily, across the board, not 50 one week and 10 the other, but pretty steadily in the neighborhood, in the zip code of 30 points, that the team's going to be fine. I said that's going to be good. And I wasn't expecting USC to consistently make that standard. I did think that Caleb Williams was going to be so great that he would usually outpace the flaws of Alex Grinch's defense. But so that's not ignorance of Alex Grinch. That's not ignorance of what Alex Grinch was going to bring to the table this season. So when you say, Oklahoma fans, we told you, yeah, I knew. I was expecting this. I was expecting this kind of a season. All right. So like, if the part of the emotional and intellectual weight behind the whole we told you thesis was, if USC's season crashed and burned, all right, if this was an 8-4, 8-5 season, a 9-4 season, didn't even make the Pac-12 championship game, didn't make a New Year's Six bowl, then it would that whole point would really stick a lot more. But, and this is where we go back to the big picture. As awful as that Cotton Bowl implosion was, as awful as the Pac-12 title game was, big picture, before the season, people were not expecting USC to win 11 games, period. No one can rewrite that part of history. And, you've people watching here at the Voice of College Football, like you've heard me just now for the past 30 minutes or so, document a lot of flaws and a lot of problems and a lot of mistakes. So like, I'm not sugarcoating this thing. Okay. Like, I'm not absolving Lincoln Riley of blame. Just the past 30 minutes are proof of that. But I can give Lincoln Riley a little breadcrumb of credit here and say he delivered 11 wins this year number 1, 7-win improvement, not quite as good as what Sonny Dykes did at TCU, but close. All right. So, we told you, like, that's not the gotcha moment that you think it is. Like, this was still a good season. It wasn't a great season because of these last 2 games, but it was still a good season. And Lincoln Riley brought a lot of good things to USC. He brought him a Pac-12 title game berth, brought him a Heisman Trophy, brought him 11 wins, brought him a New Year's Six bowl. And these things were generally viewed as being outside of what USC was going to be able to achieve going into the season. Most people thought this was an Alamo Bowl team. Most people thought this was a Holiday Bowl team. But no. So we told you, okay, you didn't tell us that USC was going to win 11 games. You didn't tell us that USC was going to win the Heisman Trophy. All right. Like, so Lincoln Riley, he has these flaws, and they carried over from Oklahoma as we all thought that they very well might. Okay. But he also has a lot of these good qualities. And so, when we look at the value that Lincoln Riley's brought to USC, not everything. Lincoln Riley definitely has his flaws. We're confronting them head on out in the open here at the Voice of College Football and at Trojans Wire. But there were also a lot of really, really good things at USC in year 1, and we shouldn't let that go unmentioned.
Yeah, so I'll take one of your statements there and then add to it in regards to my evaluation of Lincoln Riley right now after 1 year. So yes, he takes over a 4-8 football team. He takes over a 4-8 program at the very best possible time in regards to the new age of college football, the ability to fix a team quickly. And he takes advantages of that. He's moving in from obviously a talent wealthy team, and he brings in what turned out to be the best quarterback in college football and one of the best wide receivers and some other piece players from Oklahoma. So yeah, 11 wins, a Pac-12 championship game appearance. That is mission accomplished to the extent, to the final degree. However, because of the issues on the defensive side of the ball and because of his track record at Oklahoma, we now have to see, okay, how are you going to address this? This is the next step. This takes you from being extremely good coach to elite coach if you're able to address that.
Sure. Okay, Len Dawson, look, come on. Lincoln Riley isn't a proven head coach. All right. No. First off, what's your definition of a proven head coach? Is it Kirby Smart? Nick Saban, like unless you're Kirby, Saban, or Dabo, you're not a proven head coach, because that really seems to be where you're going with this. Like if you make several college football playoffs, if you win a pile of conference championships, if you win 10, 11, 12 games per year. This was Lincoln Riley's first season because of the Cotton Bowl loss. This was like Lincoln Riley's first season as a collegiate head coach with more than 2 losses. All right. And it was still a year in which he won 11 games. All right. If that's not a proven coach, like what's your standard? Okay. Is it, he didn't win a national championship at Oklahoma. He hasn't reached a national championship game. Like, that is just arbitrary. And frankly, it's very unserious. All right. Amateur hour.
Yes. And here's another definition that needs to be placed on a term, depending on, we see the term, who's relevant? Is this program relevant? What does relevant mean? And, I've had zillions of chats with college football fans. And when it comes down to it, many of them think winning a national championship is relevance, and otherwise nobody's relevant. I point out to them, we're talking about like 3 guys. So the next point here would be, so to me, winning against the best teams in the conference to get yourself in position to win the conference championship, and then completing the deal by winning the conference championship, those are big games. If your big game is simply college football playoffs, then that's fine. That's your definition. That's not how I see it, because you have to beat the best teams in your conference. You have to win the conference championship typically to get to the playoff. Those to me are big games.
Yeah, and CE, name me another coach that has lost the biggest games of the season with 3 different Heisman winners. He coached 3 different Heisman winners. How many other coaches can say that? All right. Lincoln Riley is one of a handful of people who have coached 3 Heisman winners in the 153-year history of college football. Lincoln Riley is one of 2 USC coaches who have coached 3 Heisman winners, Pete Carroll being the other. Only 2 men have coached more Heisman Trophy winners than Lincoln Riley. That's Nick Saban and Frank Leahy. Only 2 men ever. Lincoln Riley is just the 2nd man ever to coach Heisman winners at 2 different programs, Tommy Prothro at Oregon State and UCLA in the 1960s. So, Lincoln Riley is one of 4 or 5 people who have ever done certain things in terms of the Heisman Trophy and in terms of getting 2 different teams, to a really high standard. Like you're basically saying to these last few comments from Len Dawson and CE, you're basically saying, unless you win the national championship, you're not relevant, you're not proven. So that basically just means that there are just 3 proven head coaches in college football right now. Saban, Dabo, and Kirby, and that's it. Okay, so there's no other proven coaches out of 130.
And as we sat here at this point last year,
not how a normal, rational person thinks about anything.
And if we were making that judgment with that definition, if we were sitting here 1 year ago today having the same conversation, Kirby Smart is not a proven coach.
That's right. Absolutely.
Having come within an overtime of winning a national championship and then getting back to another national championship game and finishing basically living in the top 5 in the nation since 2017.
Yep, and you could say the same about Dabo going into the 2016 national championship game against Alabama. The rematch.
Yep.
With Jalen Hurts, that he wasn't a proven coach until he beat Alabama in that 2016 title game in Tampa. So that just underlies the absurdity of that kind of thinking. Like is Jonathan Smith of Oregon State not a proven coach? Is Mike Elko of Duke not a proven coach? Is Jim Harbaugh not a proven coach? All right. We could go on and on and on and on. And just the absurdity of that becomes very nakedly apparent very quickly.
Yes. Jim Harbaugh is probably the best example of that absurdity, just because of what he did in college, then in the NFL, then back to college.
Yes. And this also means that in 1981, Dean Smith was not a proven college basketball coach. He made 5 Final Fours and 3 national championship games, but he didn't win the national title. So he wasn't a proven coach until 1982 when Fred Brown of Georgetown throws the ball to James Worthy, the guy on the wrong team. That's how Dean Smith won his first national championship. And he won his second one with the Chris Webber timeout against Michigan. But because those two players on opposing teams made mistakes in the final minute, Dean Smith's now a proven coach. But he wouldn't have been a proven coach otherwise. Get out of here.
Yes. He became a proven coach by the program that he built that just churned out juggernaut year after year after year after year. Tom Osborne, not a proven coach until the 1995.
Until 1995. Only in 1995 did he suddenly become a proven coach. Not with all those, 2 decades of Big 8 titles, Orange Bowls, and the whole lot. Exactly.
Yeah, it's always a fun conversation, folks, here at the Voice of College Football. Always appreciate Matt being here. Since we've got a few minutes left and we do have a national championship game coming up on Monday night, do you give TCU a chance? What are your basic thoughts going back to the crazy game that they played with Michigan? And then to me, the first game, TCU Michigan, was more of just a crazy, you don't know what's going to happen next, zany circus of a game, just Ringling Brothers all over the place, which made it fun. The second game was like 2 super talented, laser focused, on point. Not that there weren't mistakes made, there always are in a football game, but more of a clean game between 2 superpowers.
I think that analysis is spot on. That TCU Michigan was like this live wire, and it just was this game with this uncontrolled radiating energy that you didn't know where that energy was going to shoot out. Yeah, it really was just unmitigated chaos. And the Ohio State Georgia was different. So I think that I certainly give TCU a chance, and I give TCU a chance for the fundamental reason that Georgia has been inconsistent, and we saw that again against Ohio State. And we saw, and like Stetson Bennett really represents that inconsistency. Like he made a lot of really dumb plays that helped Georgia, fall behind by 14 points. I mean, it starts with that missed read. Georgia would have had a 25-yard touchdown run, but Bennett pulls the ball back on the first drive, and then he threw the ball well across the line of scrimmage. Later in the game, just made a lot of really shaky plays. And that's been kind of reflective of his season, which has been up and down. Georgia scored just 16 points against a Kentucky team, which lost at home to Vanderbilt. That Missouri game, 26-22, very ugly, very choppy game most of the way, did enough to win, but that was another ugly performance. So Georgia's been up and down. It hasn't been the dominance and the consistency of 2021. And so just that being the reality, there's no guarantee that Georgia plays its best game against TCU. But here's the other side of it. Georgia did not play particularly well against Ohio State, was chasing that game most of the way, was trailing on the scoreboard most of the way, and was able to get away with it. So I would say that it's likely. I don't think it's a lock, but I would say it's likely that Georgia does play a tighter, more focused, more on-point game against TCU. And while Max Duggan is a terrific quarterback, and we saw that once again, making the plays he needed to make against Michigan, CJ Stroud, who I have been skeptical of, for most of this season, CJ Stroud played like a number 1 pick. That was the very best of CJ Stroud. So on point, so sharp, also able to, get away from pressure. That I think was really the biggest thing I saw from CJ Stroud, that when Michigan pressured him, didn't make the best reactions or responses, didn't have a plan B, wasn't able to kind of rise above everything else and put his stamp of dominance on the game. Well, he did that against Georgia. And of course, this Georgia defense isn't nearly as good as the 2021 version, but it's still really, really good. Jalen Carter was a non-factor. Stroud was just in total command of his surroundings. That's the kind of game that I've been waiting to see with CJ Stroud. And so, that is a level that Max Duggan does not bring to the table. Now, for TCU fans who might be watching, Duggan had a better year than Stroud. Before you get on me, Duggan was a better quarterback than Stroud over the course of the full season. But in the playoff semifinals, that was the very best of CJ Stroud. And so whatever Max Duggan brings to the table, it's not likely to be as good as what CJ Stroud offered in the Peach Bowl. So I think for those two reasons, that Georgia's probably not going to play two clunkers in a row, and whatever Stroud brings, Duggan's not going to be able to match that. I'm thinking that Georgia, is going to be able to handle this without too much drama. But I also wouldn't say it's a lock, given how inconsistent Georgia's been this season.
You can also look at it this way from a Georgia defensive standpoint. They faced a Tennessee team that had better offensive metrics than Ohio State when it came down to it. They were, that arguing point with Ohio State throughout the season is the most prolific offense in college football, and Georgia just laid them to waste. 2 touchdowns. The second one didn't matter. 1 touchdown on the board. And then Oregon was a 7, 8, 9th ranked offense in the country, scoring at will against just about everyone. And Georgia put the clamps on them. The only team that advanced the ball downfield comparably was, of course, LSU, but then you also have to put the game situation into account. Ohio State's the only team that damaged that defense to that extent with the game on the line.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one thing, by the way, one thing we really need to talk about with the Peach Bowl, since we're kind of dealing with these related subjects in the national championship game, we have to get this point through that if a coach has, an offense that, is in the position that Georgia had, first down, like around a minute left, maybe 50 seconds left, first down around the 15-yard line, you have an elite quarterback, an elite offense on the other side of the ball. If that team scores early, like especially on first down, that's coaching malpractice. That is a coaching failure. We really need to think about that in that vein. And so Kirby Smart was extremely lucky that Ryan Day, ran the ball when he got to the 29-yard line. He then ran the ball, took the air out of the ball. I know that Ohio State tried to throw on second and third down, but that first down run, like that blunted the momentum. Like Georgia was on its heels, but Ryan Day pulled back and blunted the momentum of that possession. But Kirby Smart's lucky because when you have the ball, and especially when it's 1st and 10, like you are in control. You're controlling how you operate on offense. And Georgia had absolutely zero reason to hurry as much as it did and score that touchdown with 54 seconds left. Georgia should have been taking the air out of the ball. And of course, you have a first down at the 15, which means you can get another first down inside the 5, and you can bleed that clock. And you can't guarantee that CJ Stroud never sees the ball, but you can guarantee that he gets the ball with like under 20, maybe even 15, at least 20. Like Georgia should have been able to maneuver that such that it scored with under 20 seconds left. And so people are going to say, wait a minute, you have to actually score the touchdown. You have to actually put up the points. All right, but like this is a Bills Chiefs scenario, right? With Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes both being on the field, and you don't want to give them the ball back with much time left. Like when you're in control of a given situation, you can let 20 seconds go off the clock. Like you are in charge of that. The other team can't determine when you snap the ball. And so like even if you're under the mindset of, you have to score the points, you can't really, manipulate the game so much in that kind of situation. Well, but here's the thing. You can let 25 seconds go off the clock and then still score on first down. All right. That is like the happy medium in terms of marrying the need to score as soon as you can, but also not give the opposing quarterback, CJ Stroud, enough time. Georgia didn't do that. And we need to look at that as coaching malpractice. And of course, what's the most famous example of this from a prior national championship game? It's that Florida State Auburn game. That Trey Mason, runs into the end zone from I think it was 20 yards out, could have knelt at the 1. Like that is something you had the ability to do. And so Auburn could have scored on first down after kneeling at the 1, but it didn't do it. So Jameis Winston gets the rock with enough time left. He goes back down the field. That decides a national championship. That was like the moment for me as a college football analyst when, end game manipulation is something that coaches really, really have to get right. And if you don't get it right, it's coaching malpractice. Kirby Smart really dodged a bullet against Ohio State with the way that final Buckeye drive ended.
Yeah, I rarely attack play calling. Those guys know, obviously, some people attack the play calling when the play doesn't work. When the play works, then they're fine. It's easy to criticize in that way. Now, there are some times in which I can look at the play calling. For example, that Ohio State run after the C.J. Stroud scramble down to the 29. When they lined up, I thought they're running off tackle. And this is a non-power back in Dallin Hayden. So what happened? The Georgia defense was just locked in and just blew up the play. So our buddy Len here, this is kind of an extension and conclusion of Amateur Hour, because Len, I do love the handle, by the way, Len, because Len Dawson is one of the great college football and NFL quarterbacks of all time, hailing from Purdue, of course, and the Kansas City Chiefs. But, he'll be back next year to laugh at USC. Well, based on your standards, Len, USC could lose the national championship game by 1 point, and you're going to be back laughing at them. So,
really stacked deck.
Weston Sloan, this is the only thing I will say, Weston Sloan. Number one, we are not obligated to answer anybody's questions or respond to anybody's comments in the chat unless you provide a super chat. We are always going to honor, of course, a super chat contribution. So number one, do not demand that I answer your question. And number two, you could at least spell my name correctly if you're going to do that. Just doesn't make any sense for you to try to get a question answered. Okay. I don't know.
So Len, USC just turned into OU of the last 5 years. OU was a top 5 program in the last 5 years. Like, that's pretty good. Like in basketball, if you make the Final Four, you're doing a pretty good job. So again, like, I fail to see where this gotcha moment is. Like that it was bad to be OU the last 5 years. Am I missing something? Like, again, you're setting up the standard of, if you're not Saban, if you're not Dabo, if you're not Kirby, you don't mean anything. And gosh, being the 4th or 5th best program in the United States of America, that's pretty good. And that's a place where USC would really like to be. Like, USC wasn't top 4. If USC's top 4 next year and doesn't win the national title, and you want to laugh at that, hey, be my guest. Laugh at us if we're in the top 4 of the 2023 season in college football. Go ahead and laugh.
Yeah, I would just guess that some of these people that make outlandish comments like that aren't necessarily successful in their careers, and I can't imagine that they hold these ridiculous standards. Now, there should be high standards. These people are making tons of money. For example, it reminds me of when Mark Richt was fired and Les Miles was fired. And I was asked, should they have been fired? Was that right? Was there justice there? And I said, well, they're both really good coaches, especially Mark Richt. They're really good at what they do. If this was some other industry, you would want a Les Miles or especially a Mark Richt. We'll set the off the field transgressions off to the side concerning Les Miles. You would want these people to be employed and running your companies or your divisions. However, when you're being paid to the top 3 or 4 in the country and you're not competing for a national championship, then yes, at some point you're not meeting expectations. You're making this amount of money. You're making top 3 or 4 money in the country. You need to go. We unfortunately lost Matt. All right, folks, I believe that should do it. We've gone over a few minutes, but that's always good once we have some Weston. So he still doesn't spell my name right, but that's fine. Do you think Lincoln Riley is a proven coach, even if he doesn't know anything about defense? Okay. Well, I would tell you that if we had a conversation with Lincoln Riley about defense, that he knows defense. You can't scheme an offense without being able to dissect a defense and know how to attack a defense. He's running into a 4-3 one week and a 3-4 the next week with multiple sets and running into a 3-3-5 the next week. So you have to know defense to a certain extent to be able to coach against it. So I don't know that he doesn't know defense. I think where your point may be more valid is, has he prioritized defense? Has he prioritized both at Oklahoma and now at USC, that side of the ball as much as the offense? We will see. It was easier for him to bulk up the offense and easier for him to raise the level of the offense than the defense. So that's how I would answer that question in regards to Lincoln Riley's knowledge of defense. I simply stated there, Matt, when you're an offensive mind and you're as good as Lincoln Riley, you have to know defense to be able to scheme against it. Maybe he can't teach a defensive tackle technique or something like that. He's not a position coach, but in terms of the coordination of the offense against the defense, he's seeing a 3-4 one week, then he's seeing a 4-3, and then a 3-3-5, multiple sets and different coverages and all sorts of exotic blitzes, so there would have to be some level of defensive knowledge. It's more about, is he going to address? And I understand the concern or hesitancy to think that he may not get that accomplished. I get it.
Well, and the main thing with Lincoln Riley is, and Oklahoma fans, like, again, I talked to an Oklahoma insider for 4 hours in the off season for our Riley Files podcast series, and go ahead and Google it. And we have all 12 episodes in our archives at Trojans Wire. Okay. So like, you can listen to our conversation. Like, we praised Lincoln Riley where he merited praise, and we criticized him and also Alex Grinch where they merited criticism. So it's like, it's not as though Trojans Wire, myself, were ducking or avoiding the tough questions. We were aware of the flaws that Alex Grinch and Lincoln Riley both brought to USC, but like, it's not as though those flaws meant that USC was an 8-4 program. All right. This was an 11-win program with a Heisman Trophy, made the Pac-12 title game, made a New Year's Six Bowl in 1 year. Took all the mess from Clay Helton, flushed it away, didn't create a perfect team, but like, I was on record as saying before this season began, the college football playoff was a bar set a little bit too high for year one. So like, I think I had pretty realistic expectations. I think I calibrated those expectations pretty well, that the limitations on defense that existed with Alex Grinch and with the personnel were not worthy of the college football playoff. And that turned out to be fundamentally correct. And actually USC got closer to that playoff bar, closer to that playoff standard than I was actually expecting. So like, I was an optimist about Lincoln Riley in year one. And even then, and I said this after the Notre Dame win, that I still actually sold USC a little bit short. So like, there's an awareness of the flaws here. And you can listen to them at the Riley Files. And our Oklahoma insider again said that Lincoln Riley is going to come to a point where he has to choose excellence over loyalty. And he has to, really look at what's going to help him to have the best possible chance to win at an elite level. And he's running up against those choices. And so here we are. So like, now we get to see what Lincoln Riley is made of in terms of his maturity, in terms of his willingness to make these tough choices. We're going to find out. It's actually going to be very interesting. But while Lincoln Riley has these flaws and he has what one could reasonably consider a crisis, and maybe that's too severe, but I think, if you wanted to say it's a crisis, it's fair to put it that way. Let's at least say that this crisis is occurring within the context of winning 11 games. It's not as though this first year was a crash and burn. And, like, look at Mario Cristobal, all right? Like, that is a situation, that was a crash and burn. And that's a situation where, the future of a program is truly in question. Not to say that USC's future isn't in question. Of course it is, but not nearly to the same extent, not nearly to the same severity. There are lots of different worlds, lots of different layers in which we view situations as being urgent or worrisome. So USC's situation, hey, it is urgent, and it's certainly worrisome to a certain considerable extent, but it's at an 11-win level. And there are other programs that are facing concerns at an 8-win level. and then Mario Cristobal at a 5-win level. So there are layers here, and we have to keep in mind the big picture. And if you're just going to go right to, well, Lincoln Riley is the example of a coach who doesn't get it. Lincoln Riley is the poster child for someone who doesn't understand how football works. When you're going right to the 11-win coach and you're citing him as the unique failure or the unique problem or the unique example of a guy who isn't proven, then you're just stamping yourself as unserious, because there's Mario Cristobal. There are other coaches, with middling records who either barely got to a bowl game or missed a bowl game. Lincoln Riley loses a New Year's Six bowl by 1 point. Are we going to at least look at the coaches who failed in their first years at programs, good programs, notable programs, high visibility programs, to a far greater extent? If you're just going to say Lincoln Riley is the example, he's the epitome of everything that's dumb or wrong or flawed, get out of here. Turn in your football analysis card, all right? And go home and think about your life choices.
Yeah, Miami's a good example. They play in a weak division, maybe the weakest in college football, and they were a 7-5 team that won, reasonable games against decent opponents, good opponents like Pitt, North Carolina State last year, and they hire a coach who won 2 Pac-12 championships. 2?
Yeah, he did win 2. One of them was the pandemic, of course, which
the 2020 season, which they shouldn't have played in the championship game. Correct. So technically a Rose Bowl and 2 Pac-12 championships. And sure, the recruiting results are exceptional to date, but that was horrendous. To liken or put beside the Miami season versus the Duke season, understanding the level of talent on the roster. I at one point looked it up, and just the difference in 5 stars, 4 stars across the board. And of course, Duke won the head-to-head matchup by 3 scores and had a remarkable season. If you really look at what Duke did this year, they didn't get blown out once. They were within 1 score, all 4 losses, finished at 9-4. Just an exceptional job by Mike Elko.
Absolutely. And that North Carolina game, Duke was right there at the end. And if that game goes the other way, Duke is playing in the ACC championship game in year 1 under Mike Elko. Just an absolutely phenomenal job. And of course, in terms of when we look at, how coaches separate themselves from the competition, Duke then having, the 3 weeks off for the bowl game and clobbering a UCF team, which did beat Tulane, the team that beat USC earlier this season, like that just affirms how much Mike Elko really seems to get it holistically at Duke.
Folks, we appreciate you being here. Please support the show in any possible way. Like the video, of course, at least do that. We left the Riley files. I found one of the episodes, and we left that link in the chat, and then you'll be able to follow that to all the other Riley episodes at Trojans Wire. So please do that if you want to really deep dive on your head coach, USC fans. It's fascinating. I listened to much of it, and it's fascinating. And I don't have time to listen to things like I don't consume content very much, but I wanted
putting it out all the time.
I wanted to hear that. So Matt's exceptional. Matt's the reason we have a show here. So we appreciate Matt, and thank you all for being here. Bring 1 or 2 friends with you next week, and let's build this up. We'll be back to the normal time at Monday. Wait a minute. We've got a national championship game.
Yeah.
So
we could be here next Thursday, but you'll just want to stand by for an announcement at some point next week.
If you subscribe, you turn on the bell for the notifications, when we go live. But we will post on our community page. We post the times of the shows, the live streams. Matt, thank you so much for all you do. We appreciate it. Is there anything at Trojans Wire that you would like to let the people know about?
Well, you just want to read through our site for Alex Grinch post-mortem analysis, and also following the ins and outs of, how USC should go about this process. So like one thing I wrote is that, firing Alex Grinch, while emotionally easy, is not an actual plan. That if USC wants to do that, it has to have an elite coordinator, not only that it pursues, but an elite coordinator it knows is going to say yes. USC has to do all of those things together. Just firing Alex Grinch and then going, okay, now what do we do? That's not a plan. So I wrote about that. I've written about the other nuances of the coaching carousel and also USC going into the Big Ten in 2024 and how they should shape the tough decisions that Lincoln Riley and Mike Bone need to make in this offseason.
Matt, thank you so much for all that you do here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate it, and we will catch up with you next week. And again, it may be Thursday again next week, but turn on those notifications to know when we go live.
Have a fun national championship game, Mark, on Monday.